This is the story of a single jet, a lone A-4 Skyhawk flying barely above the waves, that tore through the most advanced navy in the world and changed the future of modern warfare forever. If you love real military documentaries, U.S. combat aviation, and untold battlefield history, hit subscribe. Now let's go back to 1982, where a tiny aircraft delivered a blow no one thought possible, the war no one saw coming. The Falklands War erupted in 1982 like a thunderclap across the Atlantic, unexpected, politically explosive, and militarily unbalanced. On one side, the United Kingdom, a NATO power, a naval superforce with cutting-edge ships and the elite Royal Navy. On the other, Argentina, battered by dictatorship, economic collapse, and desperation to reclaim the Malvinas Falklands. No one believed Argentina had the fighting capacity to challenge the British fleet. But war isn't decided by predictions, it's decided by moments. And one such moment was delivered by the A-4 Skyhawk, a small, outdated Vietnam-era jet the world didn't take seriously. The Skyhawk was nicknamed Scooter by U.S. Navy pilots because of its light frame and tiny profile, barely large enough to hold a pilot and a bomb. By 1982, it was considered too old for the U.S. military, retired from frontline American service. But Argentina still flew it. And in the coming weeks, those jets would change the balance of the war. The British task force sailed south expecting a conventional battle. What they were not ready for was the bravery, low-altitude strike tactics, and suicidal determination of Skyhawk pilots willing to fly into missile shields, radar nets, and the jaws of death. The stage was set for one of the most shocking naval strikes of the 20th century. The A-4 Skyhawk was a paradox, fragile yet deadly, simple yet powerful. Designed by the legendary Ed Heinemann, the aircraft was built around a single principle: speed beats armor. No heavy avionics, no radar, no electronics that could save the pilot if a missile locked on. But the lack of weight gave it a brutal advantage: agility and speed at ultra-low altitude. U.S. Navy pilots once said, "If you want to survive, fly so low the sea spray hits your canopy." And that is exactly how Argentine pilots learned to fly. Every Skyhawk strike in the Falklands required pilots to skim just above the ocean, so low that birds hit their wings and waves nearly touched the fuselage. The British Sea Dart and Seawolf missile systems struggled to lock onto something flying 20 feet above the water, and so, a jet considered inferior suddenly became the most dangerous threat the Royal Navy had faced in decades. For these pilots, combat was not just a mission, it was a near-suicide strike. They trained with minimal resources, flew without modern countermeasures, and used nothing but courage and instinct to survive. This combination, primitive jet, fearless pilot, and low-altitude expertise, created the perfect weapon for a moment the world never expected. By May 1982, the British task force had pushed deep into contested waters. Aircraft carriers HMS Hermes and HMS Invincible launched Sea Harriers, the UK's pride, fast, maneuverable, and equipped with AIM-9L Sidewinder missiles capable of striking from nearly any angle. British destroyers formed a shield, equipped with long-range Sea Dart missiles and state-of-the-art radar. In theory, it was an impenetrable fortress, but in the South Atlantic, theory often melts in the fog, wind, and radar-distorting weather. A chain of islands, mountains, and frigid air played havoc with sensors. The British had the technology, but the Argentines had the terrain and the winds. Radar screens flickered, targets disappeared in sea clutter. And then there was the low-altitude problem. Argentine pilots had mastered the art of flying below the radar horizon, making themselves ghosts until the last seconds before impact. Commanders on British ships stayed on constant alert, awaiting the inevitable moment when those blips suddenly appeared, moments before bombs streaked through the sky. Every sailor felt the pressure. Every captain knew, if we miss just one aircraft, we lose a ship. The mission briefing, operation against the British destroyers. On May 21st, intelligence came in. British destroyers were operating dangerously close to shore, providing naval gunfire support for landing troops. For the Argentine Air Force, this was the opportunity they were waiting for. The target was HMS Coventry and HMS Broadsword, two powerful warships operating together as a missile trap team. Coventry would lure aircraft higher, while Broadsword fired Seawolf missiles for the kill. It was a deadly combination that had already shot down several Argentine jets. But headquarters had a bold idea: Attack the pair at ultra-low altitude, split them apart, overwhelm their defenses, and deliver a crippling blow that would shake the Royal Navy's confidence. The pilots selected for the strike belonged to Group 05, men known for extreme low-level flying. Their leader, Capitan Pablo Carballo, briefed the mission simply: "We fly low, we fly fast, we do not break formation. If you gain altitude, you die." They would arm the Skyhawks with British-made 500-pound bombs, ironically purchased from the UK years earlier. The risk was enormous. The survival chance? Near zero. But morale was high. These men were fighting for their homeland, and every mile south meant stepping deeper into danger. The British Sea Harriers, flying combat air patrol overhead, were the nightmare of every Argentine pilot. With superior missiles, radar, and maneuverability, they dominated air-to-air combat throughout the war. Argentine pilots respected them deeply and feared them just as much. Before every strike, they prayed to avoid the Black Death, the nickname given to the Harriers. But on May 25th, an opening appeared. Cloud cover and poor weather disrupted Harrier patrol lines. Radar operators struggled to maintain a consistent picture. The Argentines saw their chance. The strike group of A4s roared across the water, flying in tight formation. Engines pushed to limits, wings shaking as they skimmed mere feet above the waves. Every pilot knew, if a Harrier appeared, the mission was over. There would be no escape. But fate favored the bold. The Harriers never saw them. The Skyhawks slipped into the kill zone undetected, invisible to radar, hidden by terrain and sea clutter. It was the perfect setup for what was about to become one of the most shocking anti-ship strikes in modern naval history. As the Skyhawks approached the British destroyers, they split into attack pairs. Carballo's group targeted HMS Broadsword. Another group prepared to strike Coventry head-on. The British ship suddenly picked them up, but it was too late. Coventry turned sharply, trying to position for a Sea Dart launch, but low-flying jets gave the system no time to lock on. Broadsword attempted to fire Seawolf missiles, but the system malfunctioned at the worst possible moment. In those precious seconds of chaos, the Skyhawks made their attack run. Flying directly at the ships, the pilots saw tracer rounds streaking past them, shells exploding in the water, and radar-guided guns sweeping toward them. Some pilots described it as flying into a hurricane of metal, but they never broke formation. Carballo and his wingman dropped their bombs, one striking Broadsword but failing to explode, ripping through the ship like a spear. Then came the second wave, the one destined to change history. The second Skyhawk pair lined up against HMS Coventry. Lieutenant Mariano Velasco, flying barely above the surface, pulled up just enough to clear the waves, aimed his aircraft at the destroyer's silhouette, and released his bombs. Coventry attempted a desperate maneuver, but it was too late. 2 bombs hit the ship, one exploding within seconds, the other tearing open compartments and igniting a chain reaction. A massive column of smoke rose as flames engulfed the ship. Coventry began listing heavily to one side. Sailors struggled to evacuate, alarms blaring, fire spreading uncontrollably. Within minutes, HMS Coventry, the pride of the British fleet, rolled over and sank. It was one of the most devastating losses the Royal Navy had suffered since World War II. And it had been delivered by small, outdated jets, costing a fraction of the ships they destroyed. News of Coventry's sinking spread instantly across British command. Shock, disbelief, and anger rippled through the fleet. How could a handful of aging Skyhawks slip past defenses and destroy a state-of-the-art warship? The answer was a brutal lesson. Low-altitude attack profiles, unpredictable weather, bravery bordering on suicidal, and the vulnerability of ships locked in specific defensive patterns. The British quickly adjusted tactics: more Harrier, patrols, tighter formations, and more aggressive radar scanning. But the damage was done. Argentina had proven something the world never expected. Even inferior forces, when used with daring tactics and pilot bravery, could wound a superpower. Meanwhile, in Argentina, the news spread like wildfire. The sinking of Coventry became a symbol of national pride, but the pilots didn't celebrate. They mourned their fallen comrades and prepared for more missions, knowing each flight could be their last. Coventry's loss changed naval doctrine globally. The age of long-range ships relying solely on radar defense was over. The US Navy, British Navy, and NATO began rethinking anti-ship defense systems, focusing more on low-altitude radar coverage, infrared targeting, hybrid missile defenses, close-in weapon systems, CIWS, aircraft warning networks. The sinking proved one critical truth. A determined pilot in a small aircraft could sink a billion-dollar warship. That reality reshaped naval warfare, accelerating development of the Aegis combat system, Phalanx CIWS, and improved electronic warfare suites. What happened in 1982 was not just a loss, it was a warning. The A-4 Skyhawk, once an underdog, became a legend. The aircraft's role in the Falklands War highlighted its unique strengths: low radar signature, agile frame, and surprising durability. Argentine pilots flew it into impossible conditions, freezing winds, complex radar shadows, and missile-filled skies. Many were shot down, many never returned. But their bravery elevated the Skyhawk into military history. Even the British military after the war acknowledged the skill of the Argentine pilots. U.S. veterans praised the Skyhawk's toughness. After all, their own Navy had once relied on the same aircraft in Vietnam. The Falklands War was the Skyhawk's final global performance, and it had taken down a British destroyer. Behind every strike were men barely older than college students, young pilots who wrote goodbye letters before flying, who told their families not to expect them back. Many had less than 200 flight hours when they took off toward the British fleet. Some navigated by stopwatch and compass because they lacked proper navigation systems. They refueled mid-air in heavy winds, flew through snowstorms, and survived missile attacks by inches. These men weren't symbols of a regime. They were professionals doing their duty. Their courage and the British sailors' bravery under fire remind us of war's human cost. Coventry's sinking took 19 British lives. Many more were saved by heroic actions aboard the ship. It was a tragedy for both sides. The day the A-4 Skyhawk sank HMS Coventry remains one of the most dramatic episodes of modern naval warfare. A small jet, flown at impossible altitudes by pilots defying death, delivered a strike that echoed across oceans and decades. For Britain, it was a painful lesson. For Argentina, a moment of defiant pride. For military historians, a reminder that wars aren't won by the newest weapons, but by the men who fly, sail, and fight with them. As the sun set on the South Atlantic that day, the smoke of Coventry drifted across the waves, marking a moment when courage, tactics, and fate aligned to rewrite naval history. And it all came from a jet the world had written off, until it proved everyone wrong.